The last time we were talking about a relationship, the possibility, does it exist, of a relationship that's like, it's amazing and it just gets better. And we said what we would talk about today is what we have found is a really big part of the foundation of that is the ability to have an uncomfortable conversation to do that. So I notice that when a man wants to bring up something uncomfortable with another man, we just do. When women
Yes.
want to bring up something uncomfortable with a man, they just do. But when, I don't know, I think women may be the same with other women as men are. Like, nobody wants to bring up an uncomfortable conversation
With a woman.
with a woman.
And you know what's interesting? Like, I don't think women are more sensitive than men. Like, just overall, we're not more sensitive than men, but we're more sensitive to feedback.
Well, I'm wondering how much of this comes from, I talk about how women have relationship skills because you have had relationship conversations
Our whole life.
tens of
Yes.
thousands of more times than men have.
Yeah.
I wonder if men are better with uncomfortable feedback because we've had that tens of thousands.
Like, think of coaches, like, think of sport with boys in sport, and even how teachers respond to boys in comparison to girls. Like, we're harder on men.
Yeah.
We're harder on men when we give them feedback as a whole.
Yeah, there's an example. There's a woman who lived as a man. So she was about 6 feet tall and she had sort of more masculine characteristics. But she lived as a man for a year to try to understand what it was like.
To be a man.
She wrote a book on it. But a couple years after that was all over. Anyway, so she found like it's hard to be a man because of the way that men are communicated with. It's just way different than women are communicated with. And it was so hard on her. Eventually, she literally committed suicide. It was that
Oh my gosh.
hard on her psyche. Probably a lot of people that are watching this have heard of it. It's sort
I
of like
haven't.
really hit the news waves a few years back, both when she committed suicide and when she told the story. So as men, maybe we have sort of thick skin. Like if you have something that you want to bring up with me, you just kind of
Well, I mean, there's
say it.
things I do where I'm like, hey, do you have space? I want to talk to you about something. But what has always fascinated me about you is like, you're very open to feedback. But I mean, a lot of women that I work with, their men are not as open to feedback as you are.
Do you think that is a sign of a relationship readiness in men?
Absolutely. Because if a man is like hyper defensive every time you bring something up, he's stuck in a childlike version of him.
I would agree. I think
Yes.
there's so much that's stuck like in the sort of 3 to 6 year old
Yeah.
area of his life, and that just he has a few years of personal work to do that. And for the men watching, like if you know this about yourself, if you know that you're sensitive, you're reactive in relationships in the past, you get really tight, you get upset, you throw stuff back whenever someone says something about you, or particularly if your partner says something about you, then you want to set up a call with Jen because you have to go back and figure out what it is that caused you so much pain, because that's what you're reacting to, and you're not going to have a successful relationship until you get that worked out. That's not like, again, we don't work on relationships, we work on ourselves.
So the way I frame that is like your inner child or your little boy is stuck and he's running the show. So as soon as you get triggered or like upset, because your woman basically is saying to you like, hey, there's something I want you to look at, all you can hear is, I'm not good enough and I don't know what to do about it. So you get really, really mad or defensive, or you take space and you don't talk to her for days. All those responses to an uncomfortable conversation indicate that there's just this part of you that's stuck and you just have to do some work around it. So don't judge yourself. Just, hey, I'm stuck here and I'm going to do whatever I can to get unstuck.
And this is like, if that's you, if you connect with a man and that's what shows up, that's not something you work on in the relationship. You
No.
give that guy space and you let him do that work. Men, if you're listening, you do this work outside of a relationship. The next level when it comes to men getting feedback is men who you hear that and then you go you're a good guy, you're a nice guy, and you're doing it to try to make her happy. That's not the way that we do work. We do it for ourselves. We
Yeah.
take that feedback and we go, whether I'm in a relationship with this woman, whether I'm single, whether I'm in a relationship with someone else, that's a good reflection of something that either I haven't noticed about myself or something that, yeah, I need to work on that. So you do that work for yourself, not to make your woman happy and to try to keep her from being upset
Right.
or from leaving you.
Right. And that's another part of why we don't have uncomfortable conversations, because we don't want to be abandoned. So we avoid. So this is really interesting. I've been working with this couple and they were in a space where they were explosively fighting all the time. So they were fighting about kind of everything at this point. Like everything was turning into a fight. So they came to me. I've been working with them individually as well as together. And then they got to a point where they're like, okay, so we're not fighting, but we're avoiding absolutely everything that's uncomfortable. So they went from like talking about everything but fighting about it to avoiding everything, not fighting. But then there's all this stuff that's going on underneath. And that's not a solution either. So I just want to clarify, you and I avoid nothing. There's nothing that we avoid.
But we're conscious and gracious about when and how
Yes.
we bring things up.
So we don't, it's not that we don't fight because we just don't, because we avoid anything uncomfortable. We avoid nothing, and we have still figured out how to have uncomfortable conversations without fighting. So that is like the most beautiful win-win space. So why is it like the best thing ever to be in a relationship where you can talk about everything, you don't fight, and there's resolution on the other side? Because you get to spend like 90% of the time that you're together really liking each other.
No, it's more than 90. We don't have 10% of the time that, like, it might be one.
Yeah. Well, okay. So like, okay, 90, you're right. So 99, I was just trying to be like realist. I don't know. Because that feels crazy. Hey, 90. Well, like, let's say the 10, okay, so the 10% of the time we're like doing grindy stuff, like dishes,
Yeah, so
stuff.
then 90% of the time we just really like spending time with each other. So
I'm going to take that
this,
back.
we
I
went
like
for-
doing dishes with you. I like going to Costco with you. I like making the bed with you. I like laundry day with you. I'm trying to think of what I don't like with you.
Yeah, and you're like even when I'm not the best traveler sometimes, vacationer.
You're just
I
intense.
get a
You're
little
intense.
angsty and whatever, and you're even good when I'm sort of in a mood. I don't know that you enjoy.
No, I don't enjoy your mood, but I enjoy, this is interesting. I enjoy connection. I enjoy hearing your stories. I enjoy like just learning you, being around you. But you know why? Because there's nothing under the surface that is grinding. There's nothing under the surface that, oh my God, we need to figure this out, but we haven't, and this isn't working. Like, there's none of that because of
Yeah.
the fact that we have learned, and us learning how to have uncomfortable conversations took a couple years.
I want to go one layer
Deeper? Okay.
deeper
I like it.
for
I like
for
it.
the men watching this, because there's a different part of the process that applies to us before we get to this. And this is, we talk a lot about this in the course for men. Before you can sort of be able to do this and make this choice, you need to be at a point in your life where you're the version of yourself that has a lot of access to a lot of women, where you don't feel like this singular woman that's in your life is like 10 times better than anyone that you've ever met. Because what that creates is a tension where you're not able to let go, you're not able to set a boundary, you're not able to do anything that's uncomfortable, because not being in a relationship with her doesn't just mean that you're single, doesn't just mean that you're lacking that sort of emotional or sexual connection. It means that you're taking a big step down. And
So can I just ask you this? So it's the men that are in relationship and they look at that woman and they go, like, I don't deserve this. So that's what they're feeling. They're like, I don't know how I have access to this woman, but I don't deserve her. When I'm working with women and a man says that, I'm like, you let him go. Like, that's such a red flag.
So I
Yeah.
never, for example, I never use the word lucky. I never say I'm lucky to be in a relationship with Jen. I'll use the word blessed.
Hmm.
I'll say that for everything that feels like work to me that I put in, I get 20 times that much back. But I also know that the same thing
Same for me.
applies to Jen. So
Hmm.
this is why you want to have plenty of great options before you choose that relationship. You need to know yourself well in order to do that.
Yeah.
You need to be like really comfortable in who you are, because that's how you show up with a great energy that women find
Yeah.
irresistible and super attractive. And then it's up to us. It's up to us as men to really understand who it is we're choosing to be with and the synergy that that woman uniquely creates. So this isn't just a matter of us being able to have uncomfortable conversations. It was me taking time to get to know myself, to know that I was able to date who I wanted when I wanted. And then before I met Jen, I was in a space where I'm like, hey, I'm taking a break from relationships altogether because they feel like a lot of responsibility. I have other things that I want to focus on. So when I began, I sort of didn't want a relationship when I met Jen, and that made the bar sort of even higher for me to say, okay, yeah, I'm considering this is actually something I want that's not going to like add more complications
Stress.
and stress to my life. And so then you're with someone where a lot of things are lining up before you even get to the parts that are uncomfortable. When you're starting with, number one, someone that you don't feel you deserve. You're sort
Yeah.
of waiting for her to realize that, you know, she can attract someone better than you. That's a pressure that doesn't work at all.
If you're jealous, like if you're, as a man, if you're feeling jealous all the time, like, oh, I don't want her to go out tonight because what if she meets someone richer, hotter, more interesting than me? If you have that, I say this to women, if he's jealous, he's not owning his worth, he's insecure. That's another one that you need to either have an uncomfortable conversation, send to work with me, or let him go. Because there's things going on for you where, like, if a man hasn't chosen himself deeply, he can't choose a partner.
Yeah, like one of the things that's, I don't think it's completely unique to us, but that's different sort of from the majority of the population when I hear people talking about it is, you know, couples will have what they call their celebrity hall pass. Like if you ever got a chance, like here's your fantasy celebrity to sleep with. And if you ever had a chance, of course I'd understand. And each of you has this, you know, celebrity that you're like, well, if, you know, I'd be okay with it to some degree. There's not a celebrity that either of us have in our mind that we would want to
Oh,
sleep with
no.
or, you know, or do something like that. There'd be somebody we might be interested in talking to as a person, or meeting and, you know, finding out more about what makes them tick.
Yeah, but for me, it's men and women. Right? It's
100%.
human beings. I'm like, wow, this is a fascinating human being. But there's nobody on the planet that I could imagine knowing me better, getting me better. And I said this to my mom, because I mean, obviously, my mom really, really knows me, and my mom and I have a pretty good relationship. And she's gotten to know Graham really well over the last 3 years, I'd say. Like, you guys have gotten pretty tight. So she knows Graham, and she has said this to me, like, out of anybody that I could have ever imagined for you, like, this guy is it. And I'm like, right? But it may look on the out from an outsider's perspective like, oh, that looks so easy. You guys are just made for each other. No, we created this space, and that's why it feels like that, because of the work that we did on ourselves, and then being brave enough to have the conversations that could have ended this relationship. But instead of ending them, it made it better and better and better and better every single time we'd have one.
And I think for us, it happened accidentally in the beginning. And one of the things that I've noticed, and I've had this conversation with a number of men, is like once you get to having this level of relationship in the beginning, as men, you're going to find there's going to be like, we're sort of used to being the one who gets stuff wrong. What was weird and uncomfortable for me is that for about the first 2 years, I found there was way more stuff that I was bringing up. And I remember sort of my thought was like, there can't be more than one thing about a woman that's imperfect in the relationship space. So doing it the first time was uncomfortable. And it was specifically, well, at least the one I remember, you're passive aggressive. And I
Yes,
was
I
like,
sure was.
I have zero space for that. And literally, if it happens again, it will be the last conversation that we have. So for me, I had zero tolerance around that kind of energy, not just because of that, but it says a whole lot more about a person and
Emotionally.
what's going on under the surface.
And I'll just own that. Like, that was me being in my 10-year-old, 8-year-old, whatever part of me was stuck.
And it was because I'm like, I have already demonstrated that you can say whatever you need to say that's uncomfortable. So to do something like that, rather than just be the grown-up version of you, like passive aggressive is not an adult version of us. It's, you know, a 12-year-old version of us at best. So I've already demonstrated that I can handle anything that you're going to say. And that's how I need to be approached. I want to be in an adult relationship with another adult person. And like I was really clear about that, and it was it. And we weren't to the point where it was sort of like, at least for me, that I was super invested. And I'm like, you know, whatever happens, happens. I just know my life is too busy and complicated at this point to be messing around with that. And it wasn't like that long later, and I don't remember what it was the next time, but I was surprised that there could be something else. Because, and I think this applies to most men, most of our relationship life to this point, until we've like, you know, really, pardon me, developed this remarkable version of ourselves, we're used to getting feedback about what we're doing wrong, how we're not living up to it. So it's a bit,
It's tense.
yeah, it's weird to do it once. It's uncomfortable to do it more than once.
If I could go back in time and do that situation over again, and this is a little Jen tip. So when someone is being passive aggressive, you can just say to them, you know what? It feels to me like there's some passive aggressive energy here. Can you be vulnerable and go deeper and tell me what you're actually feeling?
And like, I'm trying to think, like, if I could literally go back in time, 9 years or whenever that was, and give myself some advice. One of the challenges is you're at where you're at in your development, and I would have been pretty tight. I don't know how much better I could have done. So that, like, the best advice that I can give you is be someone, for men. This applies to women too, but particularly for men, be someone who just lets people know, hey, if there's something that you think that's important for me to work on, whether it's being more gracious in the way that I bring something up or whatever that is, I want you to know I'm open to that. I want to work on all the parts of myself that I can do better in, because you're going to have parts of yourself that are really rough, some parts that you've done some work on, and some parts that you're completely blind to. But if you let people that you're close to know, this can be at work, this can be with your kids, can be with your partner, can be with your family, can be with your friends. Hey, like, I'm working on being the best version of me that I can be. So I'm happy to hear what you have to say. Some might need to be a little gentle sometimes, but so
I like how you said that gentle piece, because when I'm working with women, I will say to them, ask your man or the man that you're seeing how he would like you to give him feedback. Like, is there something that he can let you know? So men, can you let her know, this is how I really like hearing feedback? Or maybe you're not sensitive to feedback, so you say what Graham said, like, I want to hear what you have to say, the things that you see that maybe I don't see. But if you are sensitive to feedback, if you are working on feeling good enough and those pieces, and you do need that feedback in a certain way, let her know how you would like feedback.
And like, another tip I can give is, what really helped me, at least, was holding in my mind a specific individual that I knew did that well, that could do something well. And then I would think, like, how would I imagine them approaching this? So it's great to have those kinds of people in your life. Anybody who's doing our courses will have access to the videos where you'll get to see us. So if you've never seen someone do it well and you're in our courses, then you'll get to see those videos where we're doing that with each other. And hopefully over the course of time that we've done them, you'll see me getting better at,
Well, you see us getting better.
so would better, would that be you being less sensitive?
Oh my gosh, I am like this is I feel really proud of this. I'm just going to share a little story. So, I was making you butter chicken the other day. I love cooking for Graham. And when I'm really, really busy with clients, like it makes me sad that I can't cook for you in the way that I used to when I wasn't as busy because I love that part of just me. Like I'm very nurturing, I'm very feminine, I love that. So sometimes I just meal prep and have food put away so you have stuff during the week. And I was making butter chicken, and as I was like being like really wild in the kitchen with a spatula, I like accidentally, this is so random, but it's so me. Like was the spatula flew across the kitchen. I got butter chicken all over you. And in that moment I was like I felt so many emotions. Like I felt embarrassed, I felt stressed. And then I was like, Jen, oh my gosh, you're allowed to make a mistake. And I didn't say don't be so sensitive, but I'm like, just own the fact that you made a mistake and let him be frustrated with the fact that you got butter chicken all over him. And so, yes, I have really worked on this part of me where I'm able to, one, you can be frustrated with me and it doesn't mean you don't love me. So that's what I've improved.
We had a conversation about that one time because I felt like Jen was so sensitive she couldn't handle me being frustrated with her. And I'm
Ever.
like, I'm a human being, and there's sometimes like we're allowed to be frustrated with stuff that makes us frustrated. So she couldn't just handle my energy. It wasn't that I was doing anything or saying anything to her. She was just so sensitive that if I would be frustrated, she would have a reaction. And I'm like,
And that
you're
makes
gonna
it,
be,
yeah.
yeah, you're gonna be frustrated with me. I'm gonna be frustrated with you. How we handle it is what matters. And another tip that I can give, I'd say this is primarily men, but it goes, I think women do this naturally. And as men, we just say everything. So whatever we're thinking, we sort of bring that up, or we're afraid of doing it. But, you know, a lot of like the minor stuff, the tedious stuff, what I'll ask myself is, like, let's say it's habits. This can be with my kids. So like earlier today, I shut the bathroom lights off, and I've been shutting the bathroom lights off now for 20 years. My oldest is 22.
How many times a day?
So sometimes it doesn't happen every day, but you know, like I remember my dad, you know, turning the heat down, closing the doors, shutting the lights off, all that kind of thing. And I just realized that there's certain things that whether it's your partner or your kids are oblivious to, and traumatizing them by yelling, by being like it's absolute. I had to think, is it worth the, you know, couple $1,000s of therapy? I'm being serious. Is it worth the couple $1,000s of therapy it takes to change that later on? And you know, we hear people sometimes talking about, or actually my kids were doing this in school. They were talking about, is it okay for parents to hit their kids as discipline? Wow. And it was really interesting because my daughter said all the kids whose parents hit them as part of discipline are like, absolutely. And I believe that, and it's helped me be the person that I am. And we've heard that from people that we know.
Yep.
And she said it was really interesting because those are exactly the people that you imagined were the ones that are in that type of dynamic, right. And it affects them, and they're not even realizing it. So whether you don't realize it and you bring whatever that stuff is then into trauma later, or you know, you do work on it. So I look at different things and go, is there something I can do? So sometimes I've literally installed motion activated lights in places where lights get left on all the time. I'm like, I can come up with a solution that doesn't involve me yelling. And there's a lot of this, I don't know what it is, selfishness that we have of like, well, why should I have to create something or fix something where someone else is the problem? This is where I think it applies more to men. It's looking at those things because it's usually like this pragmatic stuff and going, you know, like we've talked before, like I'm the water filler. Yes, I would come down and like the Brita would always be empty. and I'd be frustrated because I go to take my, my vitamin C or whatever it is in the morning, and I got to wait for it to filter because I don't want to just drink the tap water. So it happened over and over and over and over. So I'm like, well, I'll just come up with a solution. I'm going to make our own bottled water. So Jen drinks bottled water, and I just save them, and I would fill a bunch of them up. Now, currently, sometimes they still manage to go everywhere in the house. But obviously, another solution is piping in the water into a fridge, right? Going and getting a different type of fridge, doing all the plumbing and stuff for that. And there's a solution. So that'd be a pretty huge thing for me to do, to go and you'd have to see the layout that we have and everything that we'd have to change to do that, to solve that. But it's at least entertaining it or talking about it rather than placing all the pressure and the blame on someone else. So
it's having the conversation. Again, that might be uncomfortable because even you talking about the water piece, there's some discomfort in that conversation. So the fact that we can talk about that, and highly sensitive women that are watching this, you are going to be sensitive to feedback forever because you're a sensitive being.
And it's an important thing to know as a man, the more feminine your woman is,
yes,
number one, the more attractive she's going to be because that energy is really attractive. But the flip side of that is she's also going to be really sensitive. So like, let's say I go in to the kitchen and I think Jen's not there. Well, Jen is there. And I pick it up, I'm like, oh, where's the, I do that next to her.
I'm going to be that's going to trigger me.
Yeah.
I might cry.
If I think she's not there, if I think no one's in the house and like she's around the corner and I don't know she's there, and I do it because I think no one's going to hear it or whatever, that's still going to affect her. And so one of the things that you can learn from that, and this is something that I live by, is like being the person that you are all the time, whether someone's there, whether you think they're there, whether you think you're all alone, who you're being in those moments, that's who you are. That's the unfiltered you. And if you can work on being a version of you that's not even like exploding, freaking out, going into some like teenager childish version of yourself in those private moments, how much more extraordinary are you going to be under real pressure? So that's kind of a bigger thing. And when I work with a man long term, we have processes for that. And that's like, when we're doing 6 months to 12 months type of, really intensive work and working on those pieces. The really cool thing is you have a version of yourself that's like anyone who meets you after that process is like, you're different, right? So that's because you've shifted how you manage your energy around all of those things, and you become a version of yourself who's pretty okay with the uncomfortable conversations because I just realized this. We're harder on ourselves than we are on anyone else, right? You do something like, oh, I'm so stupid. I can't believe I did that. When we were out for our walk before, this woman was jogging along. She caught her toe and just hammered onto
She fell.
What did she say? She said she called herself. She didn't call herself stupid, but it was, like that kind of thing.
She yelled at herself.
She blamed herself.
Right.
So you become the kind of person who's more kind and gracious to yourself.
And this is both men and women.
Yeah, in those moments. And when you're more kind and gracious to yourself, because we're hard on ourselves all day long. Like, if you think about it, like what have you been hard on yourself about today or yesterday or this week? I guarantee you can think of something where you're like, upset with yourself for, I spent this money, or I did this habit, or I was late, or whatever it is, and you're hard on yourself.
Got upset with my kids. I wasn't nice to my partner. So it's that piece too. To the highly sensitive women, you need to really own your sensitivity. And I believe that, so I just want to circle this back to uncomfortable conversations. It would have been really hard for you at the beginning to have uncomfortable conversations with me because of my high sensitivity.
Yeah, so...
But once I started owning that...
I wouldn't have known how. So let me give a couple tips on this, particularly for men. So number one, imagine someone else that does this well. So for me, every time I do that, it's Jen's brother. He's like extraordinary when it comes to being a gracious human being. Number two would be like having some resources, like looking at that and seeing someone go through it, so you know
Yeah.
what's going on. So whatever course that you're taking, go in and watch those videos when, like, it literally says in that section, the uncomfortable conversations that we have, and see it happening. Then if you need to do work on it because you realize I'm just not good on it, either because you're too intense or you're too scared to have the conversation, then book a call, do the work. And then if you're in that dynamic and you're like, I just don't know. Who was it? Oh yeah, one of the clients we're working with, he's like, I need to bring up my partner's weight. And it wasn't because he was unattracted to her, but it's like, it was getting to the point where he's like, I'm worried she's not going to be around, like, for the long term. And I don't know how to bring this up, and I don't want it to be hurtful. So he booked a call. They had a conversation. They
With
did that with you, and that ended up working out really well. So there's lots of ways that you can do this, and you have a lot more tools than we were
did.
working on through that process. We were just
Yeah.
sort of figuring it out by trial and error. But like the big thing is the commitment to go, you know what? I'm going to become a person who's great at having uncomfortable conversations. That may be the number one thing a person can do that turns them into the version of the self that is irresistible, not just to the other gender, or if you're in a relationship, to the partner that you're with, but just to people.
So true. So can I do a couple tips about like why uncomfortable conversations for us have worked? Because we've really mastered this in a way that sometimes it used to take us 3 weeks to work through something. Then we got to, like, 3 days, 3 hours. Now, honestly, we're like 3 to 13. I'm using threes right now. But this is a really big part of why we can do uncomfortable conversations. We do not continue in the conversation if we get above a 6 or 7 out of 10 energy.
Okay, there's that. And then the other thing is, and this is something as a man you have to develop a skill in, because women cycle.
We loop.
They loop on the same thing over and over and over. And I'll be like, I heard you, I agree, or I've addressed it, and
But you need to have an agreement around that. So our agreement is, if I start looping, you say, babe, this helps. Babe, I love you, but you're looping, and I'm done. Just
well,
like
we had
that.
to, like, I just want to give something like real and practical, because sometimes you're not going to have that. You're not going to have the agreement before the first time it breaks down. So one of the things that
Okay.
we did really well is when it went completely sideways. And that happened a number of
Oh,
times
yeah.
in the first couple of years, where it was like, where we did, like, where it was a fight, where it felt like a fight, and you're going, I don't even know if I want to be with this person. I can't believe they, like, all that type
Oh,
of
it didn't
energy.
feel like a fight. It was a fight.
And then the thing was, when we came back with the intention of being constructive rather than continuing the fight. So if you end up in a fight, the time that you take away is you deciding, is this person worth doing this with? And if they are, then I'm going to come back with a constructive energy. And that's when we would figure out our agreements and go,
Yes.
where did it break down? And
Why did it break down?
what can one of
Yeah.
us do before it gets to that point? And particularly in the couples course, we really go through lots and lots of those examples, because it's the same in all relationships. And we just dug into them. Like, we didn't stop when we were good, we were happy. We really dissected everything about it, took it apart, and go, like, we're people like everyone else. I'm a man like other men. Jen's a woman like other women. What is it that makes this happen? Because we need to figure this out. And I'd be, so sometimes it felt like the fight would be done and I'd still be really frustrated, and I'd be frustrated because I'm like, even though we have a solution, I don't know what I would say to someone else that's fixed it. We're good now, but I don't know exactly what I'd say to someone else to prevent it. Then we work deeper and go back and figure it out and go, oh, this is what's going on. And if that's happening, would it work if and usually it was like the first idea that I would come up with wouldn't work, but then Jen would come up with something, and then I had to figure out, could I do that when I'm in the energy of whatever? So we've really gone through and figured those things out and made sure that they're, all in a place labeled and listed. If this, then, and you can go through and actually see examples of it.
Oh, you used to say this to me. Babe, we gotta stay in this because how are we gonna teach it if we can't figure it out? I'd be like, oh my gosh, because I'm sure some of you can relate to this. You feel like you've resolved it, and then if you go back, or maybe you don't feel like you've resolved it, you feel like things are neutral, and then this is why we don't actually finish the uncomfortable conversation because we go,
You get out of the discomfort.
I don't want to go back into the uncomfortable space and get into it again because we're just going to fight. And I'm like, right. So this is again why people avoid it because they never go deep enough to resolve anything. Because you know what's actually going on underneath? I'm scared that you're going to leave me. I'm scared that we're never going to figure this out. I'm scared that we're actually incompatible. So then we avoid all the things that we really need to get through to know if we even are compatible.
That is the space of uncomfortable conversations.
Yes.
Is like I'm scared you're not going to like me, or this isn't going to work out, or we get to the point where we go, screw it, I don't even want to be in this relationship. I don't even think I want to.
Yeah.
We tend to be in one of those two places. Uncomfortable conversations is the energy of everything that's in between.
Yes.
And the reason that they're so valuable and powerful is that in the pressure of that space, that's where the emotional parts of us become more of a grown-up. And people can feel that energy shift. So that's literally the emotional gym. Our emotional gym is uncomfortable conversations.
That's it.
And the better we get at that, the more we show up as a version of ourselves that people find really attractive. And it's not like some facade that we're putting on. We're brilliant all the time, and we're particularly brilliant relative to everyone else when it really matters, when it's coming down.
Like your ability to navigate uncomfortable conversations, both genders, makes you an emotionally and energetically safe individual, which is the most hyper attractive thing to the other gender.
So, for example, one of the things that I notice about us is there's nothing that we complain about. We don't complain about our neighbors. We don't complain about the weather. We don't complain about politics. We don't complain about family. We don't complain about our kid. Like, we're not complainers. We don't have that energy because we've just realized, like, we look at life, what can I do? What can I do in that space? If there's something that I don't like, what are the options to me? So instead of me going, complaining and being frustrated about there not being water in the kitchen, I go, okay, so what can I do about it? Instead of being, it's not fair. Why am I the only one who's filling this Brita up? It's like, okay, apparently I'm the only one who notices this. So what can I do to make sure that I have some water here for me, even though everyone continually empties this out?
Or you could ask me, if it was such a big deal to you, I would hope that you would say, hey babe, can you add something to your list? Can you work on filling the Brita water when you're in the kitchen? And then I can say yay or nay.
I've mentioned it before. So that's one of the sometimes what I'll do is I'll mention something and see if it takes. Because if it's not naturally there for someone else, like the stuff that pisses us off about people or whatever is going on is stuff that we're hyper focused on that other people just don't care about.
Oh my gosh, this is what's so funny. So I really like when the counters are wiped, and you really like when the Brita is filled. I literally don't care about the Brita at all. You don't care about the counters. So we don't ask each other, because I wipe the counters down every time I come into the kitchen. You fill the Brita water because that's important to you. The counters are important to me. So I think what we've done that works is if it's really important to us, we just take it on. Which feels like, like that's a really adult grown up thing to do. But let me tell you, we spend no time being frustrated with each other about that. It gives you more time to just do the stuff you like.
Being frustrated with the world.
Right.
And the amount, like when I go out and I'm around like just regular people, the amount of complaining, or when you're on social media, whatever it is, whatever those spaces are, there's so much people invest in complaints in areas where nothing's going to change from the complaint and doing it that way. And I'm always just wondering, like, if it's that important to you, then why not take something on in that area? And like, I know why it feels that way to me. It's like, well, I already feel like I have enough on my plate from all this. I don't want to. I don't want any extra load. But who's ever doing it, it's going to be extra.
It's also really socially acceptable since social media has become, such a big part of our lives. And like, I guess even before that, like when you watch Everyone Loves Raymond or you see these, couples on social media, most of the content is complaining, whining, like women being frustrated with their husbands, husbands being frustrated with their wives, people frustrated with their kids. Like there's so much out there.
Yeah, so I'll challenge you on
We
this.
need to do better.
This is something to take as an assessment for yourself. And I'll work at putting something down as a resource where you can go through it and sort of check
Checklist.
boxes, and you can see how many of these things that you do. If you follow, for example, people that are negative, they're facetious, they're malicious, they make fun of some, even in, I sometimes see in the spectrum, there's sort of this thing right now where women will, what do they do about their husbands? They just dump on everything that's wrong with him and what he does and all the dumb stuff that he does around the house or in a relationship or whatever, and that's their whole channel.
That's
Is
it.
jokes and comedy about that, and sometimes it's not even funny, it's just mean. Or it's that content about how men are crap in general. What do men follow that's negative? If
Oh, I have this one particular client that always sends me these horrible reels about how crazy women are and they have multiple personalities and they're impossible, impossible,
Sure.
impossible. I'm like, this isn't funny. Like, if that's your relationship, leave. Why are you in that?
So if you're following stuff like that, if that's the messages or communication that you're putting out there in the world, if your feed is lists of complaints about whatever, right? So people, whatever side you're on about the COVID stuff,
Sure.
I'd see people, their whole feed was being in that fight with the other side, that they're frustrated with how they felt about it. Because uncomfortable conversations exist in every dynamic of culture,
Life,
society,
yeah.
and what we're doing. And the better we're able to navigate that, and the less time we spend being in the tension of the fight, probably we live longer.
Probably we will. Like, uncomfortable, but let me just clarify. Uncomfortable conversations aren't a fight. Uncomfortable conversations is where we really learn each other. That's like, how did we learn each other? In the uncomfortable conversations.
And what it's done for me, and this is, I think, particularly phenomenal for men, if you run your own business, if you're a leader in any dynamic, when you learn to have conversations with people who, whatever their belief is or their behavior, is diametrically opposed to you or what you need. And like if you're a boss and someone is showing up and they're not doing something well, like instead of just being like, this is just what an adult should be able to do. Why can't you show up? Why can't you do whatever? And you take a little bit of time and you try to understand.
Grace.
No one is showing up to fail in anything. No one,
Right.
no one begins their life trying to be an asshole. Generally, no one begins their day going, I'm going to be an asshole. So what's going on for them that's resulted in them showing up that way and understanding that? And I found that, like, when you can put some energy into that, and again, it's not fair that you should put some energy into that on the other side of it, but whether I'm the boss, the coach, the parent, when I take some time and understand that and lean into that, the currency that you build with that person has them love you in that space the way they've never loved and trusted anyone before. And they'll become your most loyal employee. They'll become your most like committed athlete if you're a coach. So the value of doing this unfair stuff
Yeah.
is that it affects every relationship that you have, and then you have that muscle to bring to your woman in those spaces. And women can be difficult to understand. So if you've done some of that work, that it's going like, I can't imagine why someone would do something that way. But you're able to, like, you're really good at being calm and gracious and being like, and I'm open to understand.
And you open to, I've said this to you before, because sometimes you do things where I'm like, I would never do it that way. So I will say, I don't understand why you did it that way. Let me into your thought process. Let me know how a man thinks and how you navigated that. When you explain that to me, I'm like, oh, well, okay, that makes sense. And then I'm not frustrated or angry.
Actually, I thought of an example of something that's an uncomfortable conversation that we didn't even realize was an uncomfortable conversation.
Go for it.
So I'm a real creative, ADHD, intense, nighttime thinker kind of person, and it's hard for me to go to sleep anytime. And so sometimes I've had a habit of staying up late, really late, like six in the morning, 4 in the morning, that kind of thing. Sometimes, and if I do that, Jen's used to it after me, doing it for 10 years. But if I do it 2 nights, 3 nights in a row, that gets frustrating because it affects things, me being tired or other things that I can do. And the other night, I pulled an all-nighter. I stayed up all
Till
night.
8 in the morning.
I came to bed at 8. So it's the first time in a long time the sun was up when I was going to bed. But there's a couple things in that. Like, I was really comfortable with the reason that I did it. I wasn't just being irresponsible. I'm good. Like, I can hyper focus on getting some stuff done, and I was really productive getting a whole bunch of stuff organized that had been sitting around, some of it for 20 years. And I've never really figured out quite how to do it. And all of a sudden I'm in it and I'm making it happen. And I know I need to take advantage of that energy when it happens. There's other times when I've stayed up and I'm just I start watching
a series,
and then I'm like, I'll only watch one, and then I end up watching the whole thing. I'm like, I should have known better, and I shouldn't have started. So that's the reminder to myself. But again, I'm not beating myself up. I'm not having a mean conversation with myself, and that I'm like, okay, learn from this, because how many of those things that you do where you sort of yell at yourself and then you do it again, you feel worse and worse every time. So the yelling at yourself doesn't work. So I came to bed, and I know that makes you uncomfortable, but I didn't come in defensive. Your energy was pretty good. Like, it wasn't negative or whatever, but it was so nothing that I don't think we would have thought of it as an uncomfortable conversation. It was just sort of this little thing. It took a few seconds.
I think I said, oh, babe. Well, I did. So I missed you. I said that. I'm like, babe, I missed you. Like, I don't like waking up in the night and when you're not, I don't like when you're not there.
Little parts of you that are annoyed for different reasons. So you're annoyed because I'm not there and you like it when I'm there.
Yes.
You're annoyed because it affects the household if I haven't slept,
No, it affects your throat. Okay, so this is the part that's the hardest for me. Is like when we're doing like a YouTube or a podcast or something like this, it affects your throat if you don't get enough sleep. So I'm hyper focused on that part of it because it affects your throat. And really selfishly, then it affects me.
So think of someone who does it well. Use that as an avatar before you get into it. Have an image in your mind. Okay, what would they do? Watch the videos or watch an example of exactly what's going on with that. Make a commitment to yourself that you're choosing to be someone that is going to get better and better, and that you're going to be a person who does workouts in this space in life because you recognize the value of it. Most of what we're talking about today, you can take away I hope you can take away the value. Like, you can see why it's worth it. Now you have to do the work, get into it, figure out what resources you need to use. The course for men, the understanding men, how to talk to men for women, doing that, or booking calls with us. So figure out what level of resource and what kind of support that you need for it. If you're already, if you're in a relationship right now and you're at that point where all the time that stuff is coming up, then for sure book a couples call with us, because it's going to take, you don't want to blow up everything that you've built already to make that happen. And then the next call that we're doing is going to be around how the sexual connection can get better rather than dying off. And unless you have this kind of relationship, I don't know anyone else who has that experience where you're years and years and decades into it, and it's just
better.
And it's built on, it's built on
Yes.
this. Like, if you aren't doing the uncomfortable conversations well, then how can you be having better sex? Because you're just mad. You can have mad sex, and sometimes that can be intense. But you leave the connection. You had some hot sex. Yeah, sometimes you reconnect after that.
But it's not this. It's not what we have.
It's not what
No.
we're talking about. So we're gonna share what that looks like, how it happens, what that's built on, and men. I think you're going to be surprised by how important this is to women. Women want an amazing
Yes.
sexual connection with you. There's not something about them that's like naturally frigid. But when things start breaking apart, that's what disappears for
Yeah.
them. Whereas our emotional availability, like, we kind of don't notice. I don't notice when I'm cranky or when I'm obsessed with something, but Jen will notice that my energy's not connected to her. For women, it's the same thing. They don't notice that connection's going away. It's just not there. So I want you to understand that women have this capacity when they feel safe and when they're open. They're sexual all the time. They're just in that space. So we're switched on and off. They're in that space all the time. And we're going to talk about all the things that go into the equation of putting that there. And mostly I want you to be able to come away from that one being able to, like, yeah, I understand how that's possible. That's like, and that's what I want. So I'll cover that with you then. And any questions that you have, just put them down below or send them to us directly, and we'll talk to you again soon.